these updates and the rest of the executives, and then you will have the opportunity to ask questions of them. I encourage all of you colleagues to start by typing your messages, your questions on the chat box, because as you are fully aware, we can never have all the time to attend to every question and every interview request thereafter. So please do utilize the channel. You are all muted for now, and my colleagues will unmute the person that will be asking a question after the Eskom representatives have spoken. You will identify yourself and the media house to which you belong, and then ask your question. And that question is really 2 sentences followed by question marks, not speeches. Thank you, colleagues. Andre, please, will you join us and talk to country?
Thank you very much, Sikonati, and thank you and good afternoon to everybody. Thank you for joining us. As Sikonati has said, we haven't prepared PowerPoint presentations for you, but we would like to give you an update on the state of the system right now, and also give you an outlook for load shedding as it will evolve over the next couple of days. First of all, however, I think it's important for us to create context to the current situation. For at least the past 24 months, Eskom management have consistently signaled that there is a lack of capacity in the country, that we need between 4,000 and 6,000 megawatts of new capacity to be added to the grid as soon as possible. And in that context, we welcome the recent announcement by the IPP office of the preferred bidders for bid window 5 of the renewable energy IPP program. We believe that that will be of assistance to enable us to proceed with addressing some of this generation capacity shortfall. Eskom itself, obviously, now that we have some funds available, will be able to also expand our own capacity. We are also faced with some challenges around procurement. I think it's well known that the current procurement methodology is not well suited to the running of large, complex industrial enterprises such as Eskom. And in particular, there are challenges around opportunities to expedite and accelerate the procurement of critical spares and of engaging with original equipment manufacturers in order to ensure that we can maintain our equipment in the state and with the spares that are required. These challenges are further exacerbated by a lack of predictable funding. As everybody on this call is surely aware, Eskom is in a liquidity constrained position, and it therefore finds itself in a very difficult situation to have the necessary funding available to enter into contracts for these long-term outages, which require us to start planning 24 months in advance and enter into commitments. And in the absence of predictable liquidity being made available, that presents a real challenge for us. A recent new challenge that has reared its head, which is quite unfortunate, is that some municipalities have not played their role in implementing load shedding. And during stage 2 load shedding, we saw a number of municipalities either not abiding by their obligations to implement load shedding or implementing it only on a fractional basis of what their commitment should be. This has put us in a position where instead of the roughly 2,000 megawatts that we would expect from load shedding stage 2, that we had to deepen our load shedding to stage 4. We have engaged with those municipalities. We obviously know who they are, and we are very grateful for those municipalities, such as eThekwini, for example, who were compliant and cooperative from the word go. Others were not similarly inclined. Since we have could we all please just mute? Otherwise we get a lot of feedback on the line. Since we have implemented stage 4, the level of cooperation of municipalities has improved. As you're aware, we have had challenges at a number of our plants, Letaba, Matimba, Kendal, Medupi, as well as Koeberg. These have come on top of the roundabout 700 megawatts that we lost due to the generator explosion at Medupi 4, when hydrogen ignited and caused significant damage to the genset at that unit. Also, we had a transformer fire at Kendal Unit 1. Together, these outages have resulted in some 1,300 megawatts not being available. Our most reliable power plant in the Eskom system is Letaba, and unfortunately over the last 2 weeks only 3 units have been operating at that plant, and that has led to losses of between 1,500 and 2,000 megawatts. At our Matimba power station, another one of our traditionally very reliable power stations, we have had excessive vacuum losses. This is due to some procurement challenges on critical spares for our cooling fans. These have been proved very difficult to obtain, and we have taken steps to augment and support management at that power station in order to ensure that we can recover as quickly as possible from those challenges. We also have emission restrictions that apply at Kendal power station, where we typically lose about 750 megawatts of load losses due to having to run the power station at lower loads in order to maintain our compliance with emission standards. Some other units have also failed, and together they have amounted to 1,000 megawatts. So what is the outlook for the week going forward? We've already seen Letaba Unit 1 return, so that's about 600 megawatts. Letaba 2 is expected by around about 6 o'clock tomorrow morning. That will add another 600. And then Kriel 1 is expected onto the grid by about 5 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. So that's positive. Then Medupi 3, Majuba 4, Duva 4, and 2 Tutuka units will return by the weekend. And if you add all of this together, we anticipate that between 3,800 and 4,000 megawatts will be added to the grid, which obviously will have a positive impact on the outlook for load shedding going forward. We have been in a position to recover our dams. The dam levels are looking quite healthy at the moment. They are not yet quite full. Given the lack of predictability of the system, it is important that we maintain our reserves in order to cater for unforeseen trips in the system. So these reserves are really critical to preserve and protect. And we intend to, over the night, tonight pump those dams to maximum capacity. Our diesel stocks at Gerikwa, we intend to replenish those over the course of the next couple of days, but the outlook at Ankerlig is not as rosy because of a lack of diesel availability in the country. So Ankerlig still remains a concern. Bear in mind that to import diesel has a lead time of around 6 weeks from placement of the order to delivery of the order by ship from an offshore refinery. So that is a constraint that we have to contend with. With all of the above said, the outlook therefore for load shedding is that we will reduce load shedding to stage 3 from tomorrow morning at 5 o'clock. This will then be maintained until 5 o'clock on Friday morning, and then we will maintain stage 2 until 5 o'clock a.m. on Saturday, after which we intend to lift load shedding, and we should then be able to return to normal operations. We understand that this is a huge inconvenience to the country. We apologize for the negative impact that this has had, not only on business industry, but also in particular on those students who are currently writing their matric exams. And we want to request the support and cooperation of everyone who is an electricity consumer in South Africa to play their role in reducing demand, particularly during peak hours. We would appreciate your support in switching off geysers. If you have a swimming pool, switch that pump off. There are many steps that we can all take to manage our demand more appropriately. As I've said, we will be engaging with municipalities to also, again, reinforce our request for their cooperation and support in helping us to navigate these supply constraints. For better or for worse, we are in this together. It requires a collective effort. It is very tempting and very understandable at this point in time to blame Eskom and only Eskom, and we certainly will take our share of the accountability, but we are where we are, and we now need a concerted effort, not only to manage demand, but also in order to ensure that we can get adequate capacity onto the grid as soon as possible. And we will certainly be supportive of any efforts, not only by the IPP office, but also by the private sector to enable that to happen as soon as possible. Sikanati, thank you. Those are my introductory remarks. I will now suggest that we open the floor to questions. I am joined today by a number of my executives who are on the call. Our Chief Operating Officer, Jan Oberholzer, is on the call. We have our Chief Financial Officer, Caleb Kassem, on the call, and then also our group executives for generation, transmission and distribution, who are all at your disposal this afternoon to answer questions that you may have. Thank you, Sikanati.
Thank you, Andre. Before I open for questions, colleagues, there has been quite a huge interest on the Zambia incident with the South African power pool. Can I request Sekhumoto, please, to give an explanation of what that incident was and what happened? Daniel, if you may be able to, I don't know how we're going to do this. I think you need to show a slide or two, but can please, Sekhumoto? Thank you.
Sikonati, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Good afternoon to all the colleagues that are on the call. I will just talk through this one slide. It's the only one that we will discuss. And it is intended just to give you a sense of a few things. I think you may be aware that South Africa, together with the other Southern African Power Pool members, are in fact interconnected from an electrical perspective. There are only 3 countries of the 12 members that are not interconnected, being Angola, Malawi, and Tanzania. But what you see as dotted lines on this picture reflect some of the projects that are planned or underway to in fact increase the interconnectivity. What the impact of being interconnected means is that the whole region operates at a frequency of 50 hertz from an electrical perspective, and there is a band within which we can operate up or down, but if the frequency is too high or too low, then it can lead to equipment and plant tripping, which obviously is something that would be undesirable, and different protective measures may come into play, leading to sectioning of parts of the network, or if not, you may even have generator stripping. So that is the broad outline. What we are trying to highlight in this case is we have from South Africa interconnections, and I'll only mention those that are relevant to this incident between South Africa, Botswana, and into Zimbabwe. And there's also an interconnection between Zimbabwe and Zambia. And at the AC level, there are also interconnections between Mozambique and Zimbabwe and South Africa. And we also have a DC link between Mozambique to South Africa, terminating at Apollo close to Midrand. The incident that occurred over the weekend was a culmination of a number of small incidents. What we are sharing here should be considered preliminary because the work to actually do a full analysis is still underway, and it is being led by the Southern African Power Pool Coordination Center based in Harare. So all the utilities will be providing data and input to the coordination center, and then the analysis will be conducted to fully appreciate what actually happened. What we do know, however, is that Zambia experienced a blackout over the weekend and lost close to 2,000 megawatts. And as part of being an interconnected network, there were power swings observed between the Zambian and the Zimbabwean networks, where a lot of power flowed into Zambia. The result of that was a condition called overfrequency. I think I mentioned the 50 hertz, and the frequency recorded in Zambia was of the order of 54 hertz. The result of that is a number of generators tripped, and the impact then transmitted into Zimbabwe, where the tie line between Zimbabwe and Zambia also tripped. And because power was now flowing north, essentially from South Africa, through Zimbabwe and into Zambia, when the interconnector tripped between Zimbabwe and Zambia, it then had an impact of overfrequency in the Zimbabwean network. Various transmission lines tripped in Zimbabwe, leading to a number of generators also tripping in the Zimbabwean network. So it's really a sort of a cascading effect between these different networks. From a South African perspective, when this incident occurred, we were already in stage 2 of load shedding. And as you will recall, part of the objective for the load shedding was to preserve the emergency reserves, being the hydro, pump storages, as well as the open cycle gas turbines. But when this incident occurred, a number of the generators automatically had to swing into action to try to preserve the frequency at 50 hertz from the South African side. And this is part of the system design, and it is not a specific manual intervention that was required to make this happen. And as these generators responded as they should, We obviously had a couple of incidents then that flowed from that. The one is we have clearly used up a lot of the expensive gas turbines, although the incident was resolved within 2 hours or slightly less, but it does mean that we had an impact on our emergency reserves, both hydro and the OCGTs. But clearly, that's a bit of an expensive exercise, and it did impact the level of security in our network. There were a couple of other incidents that occurred in the network around the same time. Some we have been able to eliminate as not related. We had a trip at Tutuka Power Station, but that has been determined to be as a result of poor vacuum at the station and not related to this major incident. There was an impact on the Apollo network, and as I indicated, although we have a DC link between South Africa and Mozambique at Kaurabasa, there's an AC link between Mozambique and Zimbabwe. So there was an impact that there was a deviation of power into the AC networks feeding into Zimbabwe, and we saw a reduction of output of the power being delivered to Apollo, which ultimately led to the loss of around 1,000 megawatts. However, overall, as I said, within 2 hours, the incident the system has stabilized, but we are needing to conduct a more detailed investigation, which the Sub-Coordination Center will lead. But in essence, some of the responses, especially the automatic protection and startup of the pump storages, operated according to design, at least from an initial perspective, to help to stabilize the frequency, which is what was needed at that point in time. I think I will pause there for now, Sikonati, in terms of that incident. One of the questions that had come up previously, which we thought we'll touch on maybe while we are on this note, around our engagements with the region. As things stand, the transactions of power, especially exports between ourselves and some of the neighboring countries, are such that we have two types of transactions. There are those that we term as unfirm, which means it's power that is being brought on a day-ahead basis. And when the system is constrained, that is actually curtailed altogether, and there's no export that takes place. There's a different class of longer-term contracts that are termed as firm power. And when those happen, we employ NRS 098, which is the standard that regulates how we deal with load shedding and load curtailment. And the trading partners are required to implement and reduce their offtake from the South African system to suit. And there's exercises that then get conducted after the fact to reconcile the numbers to ensure that all the parties have fulfilled their obligation to curtail as is necessary. When we do have a constrained system like we do in terms of informing the South African customers and public, we do the same to alert the region when we have constraints so that they can take other measures to reduce their reliance on Eskom under those conditions. Let me stop there for now, Sikonati. I trust that helps. Thank you very much.
Sekgomuso, that does indeed. Thank you. Before you go, I just wish you to just explain again Apollo. That's the line coming from Kaurabasa all the way through to Pretoria. Am I correct?
That's correct, Sikonati.
Thank you. Lastly, please can you give your designation and your full name the way it should be pronounced, please?
It's Sekgomuso Skeepers. I'm the Group Executive for Transmission. Thank you.
Thank you, Sekgomuso. Jan Oberholzer, I'm going to come to you after Monde. Mondepara is going to talk to us about the municipalities that did not shed the load as required. Monde, please, thank you. Can you start by giving us your title as well, please, and full name?
Yeah, thank you, Sikonati. My name is Mondebala. I'm the Group Executive for Distribution. Just in terms of the issues of the municipalities that did not reduce their full requirement, just some background. In terms of our obligations as licensed distributors, we have to adhere to our regulatory requirements. NRS 048.9 of the regulations requires each of the licensee to reduce their load, obviously under declared emergencies, in line with the instructions from the system operator, whose role it is to manage the security and stability of the power system. Now, in doing so, each of the licensees is required to reduce their load depending on the stages that has been declared by the system operator. Now, it has been, we have observed that in the past events of load shedding, that some of the municipalities were not reducing their load in line with the required blocks. This was not only limited to municipalities, but even some of our key industrial customers, they were not giving us a full lot. We are engaging with these municipalities and these customers with a view of correcting the situation for all future load shedding scenarios that might arise. As we speak, we have drafted letters to all the affected municipalities, pleading with them to make sure that we align our the requirements with their schedules, so that we manage the stability of the grid. Sikonati, that is the story on the municipality and the load shedding. Thank you.
I'm struggling to unmute myself. There we go. Thank you. Monday, not so fast, please. I did not hear you naming the municipalities.
Yeah, no, thanks, Sikonati. Yeah, we of the municipalities that we supply, only eThekwini and Buffalo City have adhered strictly to their load shedding requirements. All the other municipalities did not. The list is quite long, so I can just mention the two that are strictly adhered. The rest of the municipalities, we are engaging with them to try and correct the situation. Thank you, sir.
Thank you indeed. Jan, please can you give us an update on Medupi Unit 4? What do we know so far, please?
Sigonati, can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Jan.
Okay, thanks, Jan Overalse, Eskom's Chief Operating Officer. I'm not going to go into the details of the Medupi 4 incident, but it was an explosion. We again thank the good Lord that we had no injuries or fatalities that fateful 8th of August this year. Now, the investigation is nearing completion. Now, we must understand that in order to complete an investigation like this, and it was a massive explosion, you actually have to take everything apart and then to assess exactly where we stand. However, we did conclude that it was an error on the part of the control staff, the operating and maintenance staff, that before we introduced air into the generator, when you purge
the H2, the hydrogen, you need first of all to put in carbon dioxide, CO2, and when that is less than 5%, only then can you introduce air, normal air into the generator. Now, that unfortunately didn't happen. We estimate at the time there was 35% of hydrogen still present when we introduced the O2, so that caused the explosion. So we nearing now the completion of the investigation to fully understand the extent of the damage and exactly what we need to fix. So we've already started to do the basic stuff, start fixing the facility itself. That took a hammering and a beating. So that is ongoing. We've appointed a recovery team, so that is fully ongoing. So we trust that soon we will have then the full extent of the damage and exactly what needs to happen. However, the indications at this point in time is that we will have this unit unavailable, 720 megawatts, which is significant, for at least 18 to 24 months. And when the chief exec earlier spoke about the challenges that we have, so we need to understand that this brand new unit, which we have implemented the design modifications on, and it was really performing very well since we have implemented the design modifications, is now not available for the next 18 to 24 months. So, Sikonati, in a nutshell, that is the feedback where we stand now.
Thank you, Jan. I hope you colleagues can hear me. There's a delay on my system here. There's a delay on my system, so please do pardon me. I hope you can hear me well. Jan, are you able to give an update on the recent explosion we had at, what was that, Kendal as well? Are you able to say anything there, please?
Yes, I can. Sikonati, basically it was a fire in the generator transformer of Kendal Unit 1. Again, it is a significant loss of capacity. It is about 640 megawatts. So if you add the 640 and the 720, you can see we shy 1,300 megawatts of capacity at this point in time. Now, we had a fire in the generator transformer that was not due to anything but an internal fault within the transformer. Now, the teams have progressed extremely well. When the group executive, the group executive of generation and myself were on site Saturday a week ago, we actually witnessed the progress, and we trust that unit will return successfully in the middle of December. So by the middle of December, we trust then that 640 megawatts from Kendal additional will be available. Thanks.
Thank you, Jan, and thank you, colleagues. I'm just having my computer delaying to unmute here. I hope you can hear me. Now I'm going to request Swazi to read
Okay, thanks, Siko. I'll just go ahead. I think you may have a connection problem. The first question we have is from Terence Creamer at Engineering News. He wants to know, given the abnormally high level unscheduled outages, are you satisfied that the qualification and certification systems are in place to ensure that companies selected to perform maintenance are up to task? Joy Summers from Carte Blanche would like to know, what is the situation with Medupi Unit 4? And Chris Yellen from EE Business Intelligence wants to know, please can you advise the current status of Eskom's medium-term generation system adequacy outlook 2021 that should have been made available by the 31st of October 2021 latest, but I have not been able to find it.
Thank you, Swazi.
Thanks.
We can safely skip Joy Summers' question, please.
Okay, should I give you some more?
Yes, just one more, please.
Okay, we've got one from Wangi at the Cape Argus newspaper. He would like to know, I would like a comment on the calls being made for the resignation of the CEO and the board.
Thank you, Swazi. I think that's the question everybody wants to hear. So let's start there. Honorary Director, you cannot speak for the board, but you can speak for yourself. Thank you.
Thank you, Sikanati, and thanks for that question. First of all, I think it's important to emphasize that the executives are appointed by the board. The board, in turn, is appointed by the Minister of Public Enterprises, who in turn is appointed by the President of South Africa. So we serve at the pleasure and at the discretion of our board. Of course, if the board designs it, considers it appropriate for me, other people to resign, then that is their decision to make. We have had no conversations in this regard so far, so I do not intend to resign of my own accord. I think what is important to emphasize, though, is there's this lovely saying in English that you can flog a dead horse. You can even go one step further and you can change the jockey on the dead horse, but that will not necessarily solve the problem. And I think given the current circumstances, it is probably more important to have continuity of management rather than to fall back into the trap that Eskom has been in over the past 10 years when we had 11 different chief executives. That lack of continuity clearly has contributed significantly to instability in the organization. So it is important, I believe, that we continue along the path that we have taken. I understand that there are frustrations, that we are not achieving our objectives as quickly as we would have liked to, but these frustrations will not be resolved, I believe, by changing horses at this point in time, or changing jockeys for that matter. Thank you, Sikanati.
My system here is quite, it's delaying, so I apologize, colleagues.
You're on mute, Sikanati.
Thanks, Jan. I hope you can hear me now, colleagues. My system is delaying here, so I do apologize. Andre, I hope that you will not be surprised when you are quoted as saying there is a dead horse in this organization. Colleagues, all your questions are going to be read. We just are having difficulties acknowledging them all. At this point, can I ask Sekhomuzo to talk to, let's start with you, Jan, now that we are here. Can you talk to the question on contractors, and then Sekhomuzo will come immediately after you on the medium-term question?
Thank you, Sikanati. Are we satisfied with the competence of all the contractors working for us at the generation plant? Absolutely not. However, there are a number of contractors that is really adding value to the organization and specifically to the generation business. Now, why do we then employ contractors that is not competent? Well, if we look at, unfortunately, the procurement rules that we're working on, and this is something that we need to address and that we're actually addressing with Treasury, and that's what the Chief Exec mentioned earlier as well, that if you have, and I want to use the car example again, if you have a Mercedes-Benz car, now, are you, as the owner of that Mercedes-Benz, going to take it to a garage that is not dealing with Mercedes-Benz? And are you going to allow mechanics to work on your car that are not qualified and trained to work on Mercedes-Benz? Now, the answer is very simple, no. However, we do not have the luxury always, because of the rules, that the procurement rules, to, with your Mercedes mechanic, take it to a Mercedes garage and use the Mercedes mechanics to work on it, as well as to whenever you need to replace spares, to use Mercedes-Benz approved and quality, spare parts. So as I say, it is challenging. So in the past, you had to go out and open tender, and then whoever, for whatever reason, was the cheapest and could demonstrate that they can do the work, they were then appointed. And this is giving us, in some areas, significant challenges, as well as it's not only contractors, it is the spare parts that we have to install that is also giving us significant challenges. But just to reiterate and repeat myself, we are discussing this with our colleagues from National Treasury to have a look at how the PFMA needs to apply to Eskom, specifically in the current situation that we find ourselves. Thanks, Sekonati.
Yeah, thank you, Sekonati. We have, in fact, put the link to the medium-term system adequacy outlook on the chat. It was put down by Peter Pretorius. The Eskom website has been redesigned, and it might be a bit tricky to find it. But Chris, it is there, and the link has been posted in the chat. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sekhomotso. I'm now going to, colleagues, I hope you can hear me. My system here is quite disappointing.
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. I'm now going to allow 3 colleagues first to ask their question. There have been hands that are raised. I may not get them in the order in which they came. But Nokukanya, please, will you be first and have 2 questions? Thank you.
Afternoon, everyone. Thanks, Sekonati. Nokukanya here from Jacaranda FM. Okay, I'll try to limit it to 2. My first one is, some experts are predicting a total collapse of the power grid, whether in the next coming weeks or months or whatever the case may be. And those predictions are that the collapse would lead to a total blackout here in SA. As it stands, is there any likelihood of this at all? If not, what's the worst case scenario that we're looking at? Is stage 4 the worst that we're looking at, or can we expect that to be upgraded as well? My second one will be, let me take the one on the lessons that we've possibly learned from electricity crises abroad. Obviously, South Africa is not the only one facing a crisis. So what lessons have we taken from abroad, and how can we utilize them here going forward? Thank you.
Thank you, Nokukanya. Firstly, Andre, can I ask you to just give an intro on the system collapse? Sekhomotso, are you able to top that up? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sekonati, and thank you for the question. No, I don't think we are on the brink of a total system collapse. We have, I would say, one of the best system operators in the world. We manage the system incredibly well and diligently, and this is exactly intended to prevent a total system blackout. Regrettably, we from time to time have to implement load shedding in order to avoid those risks from becoming a reality. But in benchmarking the way in which we operate our system with best practices internationally, I think we can confidently say that with our current system operator and the way in which we run the grid, that I have every confidence that we will be able to avoid a total system blackout. So I don't think that is a realistic scenario at this point in time. Sekhomotso, anything that you'd like to add?
Andre, no, thank you very much. No, I think you've said it, Andre. I mean, this is partly why we have to load shed, is to protect the system. But other than manual load shedding or rotational load shedding, We obviously have various other protection devices in the system that also serve to protect the system from total collapse. I think operationally, and this is something maybe I need to say publicly and to thank all our principals, is that we give the system operator the license to do what is necessary to protect the system. And we don't interfere with their decisions. We can question them after the fact. But in real time, they need to do what is necessary to protect us from a total blackout. Thank you.
Thank you, Sekhomuja. Thanks, Andre. Jan, please mute yourself. Colleagues, if you have already asked your question, please lower your hand. We may yet get another opportunity to come back to you. And I do encourage you again to keep writing the questions. We will get to all of them. The next two questions come, please, from Carol Payton and Kaya Sitole. Colleagues, please unmute Carol and Kaya in that order. Okay, we seem to be having a problem there. Swazi, can I ask you to read the next two questions while we work on resolving the unmuting?
Okay, Sikho. We've got one from Khutatso Maidi. We don't know which publication they're from. He wants to know, how long are we going to be in load shedding? Another one from Terence Creamer at Engineering News. Given the abnormally high level and scheduled outages, are you satisfied that the qualification and certification systems are in place to ensure that companies selected to perform maintenance are up to the task? Would you like one more?
No, that's fine, Swazi. Please, let's hold there.
Okay.
How long are we going to be in load shedding for? Andre, do you want to take that question, please? I'm sure we have been answering that question for a bit.
Yes, so I think there's a short-term response, and that is that from Saturday morning, apologies, we should be out of load shedding at 5 o'clock. That is the plan. But then I think it's important to stress that until such time as we add the 4,000 to 6,000 megawatts that we've been talking about for the past 2 years, unless we add that to the system, the risk of load shedding is going to remain. That is something that we've said before, and we have to say it again. The country needs additional capacity in order to give Eskom the headroom to carry out some of the maintenance that is overdue, and also to maintain scheduled maintenance programs, but B, also to cope with increasing energy demands going forward. So that, I think, is the key catalyst to resolving the load shedding risk going forward. Thanks, Sikonati.
Thank you for that, Andre. Before we answer the next question, let's try again. Colleagues, you also need to unmute yourselves on the other side. Shall we try Carol and Kaya again, please? You need to also unmute yourself. Kaya? Okay.
Thank you. Sorry, finally sorted.
Go ahead, Kaya.
Good afternoon, Andre. I think the key question for me is that there is probably no doubt that everybody across the country understands that we've got a load shedding crisis. What we're dealing with here is a question of how this particular executive team is failing to manage what is known as an existing crisis. So the one example that people keep citing is that a couple of days ago, I think it was yesterday, you actually moved the country from stage 2 to stage 4 within a 30-minute window period. And of course, the problem with that is that it indicates a profound inability to understand your own broken system, because you simply seem to be surprised by what happens and what materializes within the Eskom system. Is this simply because you as an executive team are incapable of understanding the system as broken as it is, in order for you to be able to plan ahead and to be able to give us what really amounts to a fair notice period for us to be able to plan our lives? That's the first question. The second question is that it now looks like it's a matter of there is this spectrum of decision making that seems to be lost here. If at some point in time you have worked out that you are running at the tightest margins possible, is it not the responsibility of the executive team to establish that, again, within a broken system, this is the margin that we'd like to have, the operating margin. So therefore, this is the stage of load shedding we're going to maintain in order to build up that capacity, so that whenever there is some tightness on the system, we do not escalate to level 4, given how disruptive that is. So my question to you is that we are no longer dealing with the question of whether load shedding exists. The issue here is how poorly the crisis of load shedding is being managed by this executive team, and how do you explain that you're still the people that are fit for purpose to run the management of an existing crisis? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the questions. Please lower your hand. Andre, please take the question about the management's ability to run this tight system. But I would like Sekgumudzo to again please explain in detail the system operator's role. At what point do you announce or declare load shedding? Thank you.
Thanks, Kaya. Yeah, I think you first of all need to recall that we have repeatedly stated, and I wish to reiterate, that our generation system is unreliable and unpredictable because of Sorry, Leslie, can you please mute? Thank you. Because of a lack of maintenance done over many years, and that has rendered the system susceptible to unpredictable trips, as we've repeatedly seen. This is not a charge that should be laid at the door of the current team, the executive team or the generation team. I think some of our predecessors should be called to account to come and explain why midlife refurbishment, for example, was not performed at plants as it should have been. We today are reaping the fruits of those seeds that were sown some years ago. So I think the team is doing what it can. Of course, we operate within a constraint where, as explained previously, we rely on municipalities to abide by the rules of load shedding. So if we announce load shedding stage 2 and only 2 municipalities in the country comply with that request, it is therefore, I would suggest, rather unfair to then blame Eskom management for municipalities simply ignoring those requests and not shedding load as they are required, which then meant that we had to implement load shedding stage 4, precisely in order to protect those reserves that we need to maintain as per best international practice in order to prevent a total system blackout. And that, of course, is exactly what happened. So if we don't get the cooperation of our customers, and here I'm referring specifically to those municipalities, then we will have to enter into a deeper stage of load shedding, not because of our inability to plan, but rather because of the municipalities not abiding by the requests that emanate from our system operator. Thanks, Sekunati. Sekgumudzo, if you would like to add anything to that.
Yeah, Andre, thank you very much. I think you've covered it well, Andre. So clearly our preference would be to give as much notice as possible. But the system operator does have the authority to intervene at short notice where it is absolutely necessary. Part of, I think, our challenge is really to try to invoke the lowest level of load shedding possible, while balancing that with the system integrity. And it is a difficult balancing act, but that's something that we will try to do better as we go along. And I think also, Andre, part of what you mentioned about benchmarking and so on, as we indicated, even with this particular incident over the weekend, where the pump storages went into automatic generation mode to restore the frequency. I think it's just evidence. I mean, it is painful, but it is part of the evidence that says the systems do work to protect the integrity of the power system overall. Thank you, Andre. Thank you, Sikonathi.
Able to add anything to this? Is the system close to collapse?
Sikonathi, I'll come in here. No, absolutely not. I think we've made the comment a number of times today that our system operator, the chief of say, is one of the best. I would venture to say it's the best in the world. So we will protect the system, and even if it means to go higher than a stage 4, that is exactly what we will do. Now, Kaya has asked the question, do we really know what we're doing? I sincerely believe so. The system operator is absolutely accurate in terms of demand forecast during the morning peak and evening peak. Now, what has happened yesterday morning is, while we had stage 2 load shedding, and we believed, and I still believe it was sufficient to deal with the demand of the country, what we then witnessed and realized, unfortunately, is that we did not get the benefits of the load shedding. And this is when we started. We did not immediately implement stage 4. We started then running our emergencies, diesel as well as water. And it went to a stage that we didn't see any relief in terms of stage 2 load shedding. And this is why then the decision was made. So we fully understand the system, and it's not that we are running blind what we're doing. But I would like to make a plea today as well, while I have the opportunity, is to ask the energy experts and some of the others as well to please be responsible and not make statements that we're facing and we're going into a total blackout. I believe it's uncalled for, and I don't believe it's a responsible thing at this point in time to do. We do find ourselves in a very challenging situation, and of what has been mentioned up to now is collectively we need to say how we're going to get through this this real challenging situation. Thanks, Sikonathi.
Jan, thank you. Colleagues, I will jump in as well and read some of the questions. Zwelinzima Vavi of SAFTU is claiming that Eskom is being deliberately mismanaged so it can be privatized. Do you have a comment on that, Andre Director?
Yeah, Sikonathi, that is a rather wild conspiracy theory punted by some so-called energy experts as well. It has absolutely no credibility. We have no secret plan to collapse the system. On the contrary, we are working hard to try and restore the system. Of course, being a state-owned company, government policy applies to the ownership of our assets, and whether or not that includes any private participation is not a question for Eskom and its management to decide. It's a question for our shareholder to decide. So we don't concern ourselves with it. We don't comment on it. It is not something that we are entrusted with. But I think propagating this type of conspiracy theory really does not add much constructive to the debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Andre. So Carol's question is on the chat now that we can't get hold of her. The next set, let's get the next question from Aldrin, please. Aldrin, you also have to unmute yourself and then you can speak. Okay, Swazi, please can you read us the next set of questions?
Okay, Siko, we've got one from Mariam Issa at Finweek. She asks, Mr. Director, when you took the helm at Eskom a couple of years ago, you said the system would be stabilized and risk of load shedding greatly reduced over the coming 18 months. Could you explain why this has not been achieved and give us your view now on whether this goal is realistic? Is there anything you wish you had done differently? Tish Hankey wants to know, how do you explain the additional technical breakdowns which have impacted and exacerbated the stage 4 load shedding from 2.5 hours to 6 hours each time? Antoinette Slabert at the report wants to know, Mr. Director, which municipalities failed to comply with load shedding instructions and what remedy is there in terms of the national standard?
Thank you, Swazi. Andre, please.
Thank you, Sikunati. I think we've dealt with Antoinette's question on the municipalities. The question from Mariam. Mariam, yes, I think at the stage when we planned our intervention in terms of reliability maintenance, it was actually quite important for us to put in place a program that could execute our maintenance in a structured manner that could deliver increased reliability and predictability of our system. I think the three things that intervened that I probably did not take into account properly. First of all was the COVID-19 pandemic. The lockdown prevented us from carrying out as much maintenance as we could have. The second element relates to the fact that we had significant liquidity issues, which prevented our finance department, and quite correctly so. I fully support the decisions made by the finance team not to release funds. Essentially, if they did release the funds, they would be writing checks that they couldn't cash, and that would have been irresponsible and could potentially have precipitated a default by Eskom. So I think that was a key constraint. The third constraint that I probably did not understand in its full complexity was the fact that our procurement system really does not lend itself to this type of maintenance program that was envisaged. As we currently sit here, the average response time for requests for approval from National Treasury is sitting at 77 days. And you can imagine that there are a large number of these requests that get made. And that has had a negative impact on our ability to A, appoint the necessary competent contractors, but also B, to do so swiftly and with the necessary efficiency to make sure that those contractors are in fact on site, properly resourced with the right spares at their disposal, the right skill at their disposal, in order to execute on the maintenance program. I would like to ask Monde Bala to comment on Tisha's question on the technical breakdowns, which I think is related more to municipal issues, which have an influence there. Monde?
Yeah. No, thanks, Andre. Yeah, just the question on the technical breakdowns, specifically after load shedding. Yes, our system is really not designed to operate in these kind of conditions. However, we try to manage it as such that we can remotely operate the network. However, we do find that with every bout of load shedding, that we do have people that take advantage of the situation in the main, and they start sabotaging the network to the extent that when we try to bring the network back after load shedding, we struggle to do so and have to dispatch a technician to attend to those issues. Again, the age of our infrastructure and the condition thereof also makes it a bit of a challenge. However, our teams are on the ground, specifically during load shedding, to make sure that these matters are attended to promptly if we struggle to retain the network after load shedding. Yeah, thanks, Andre.
Okay, Sigonati, next round of questions, please.
Let's take two hands again, please. Colleagues, can I request those that are not scheduled to speak to remain muted? In short, please, if you can, Aviu Mtila and Sophie Mukwena, please start by introducing yourselves. You also have to unmute yourself, and so does Sophie.
I'm ready to ask a question.
Go ahead.
Yes, Mr. Director, you left South Africa at a time where we had this crisis. I mean, you spoke about how you went to a site where there were problems with the generator, and you'd recall that the Minister of Enterprise had a press briefing talking about the challenge that we're facing. So when you went to Glasgow, you were fully aware that we have challenges. Why did you go to Glasgow while the house was burning? And at the end of the day, you didn't even participate today during the panel that discussed challenges of electricity. Two, the issue of Kaharabasa cannot be an excuse. We were told a few years ago that the contribution from Kaharabasa is not as huge as people would expect. In other words, the impact is minimal. And then the last question, we spoke to international investors, particularly the Chamber of Commerce, the US Chamber of Commerce today. They are complaining about transparency. 20 minutes, you announced that you are going to implement blackout stage 4. How do you expect big industries and small business to plan? Are you sabotaging the economy?
Thank you, Sis Sophie. Please do lower your hand once you have asked your question. Andre, please respond.
Yeah, I think the suggestion that I'm sabotaging the economy with respect is quite preposterous. On the contrary, as I've explained before, Eskom is part of a system. If municipalities do not abide by the requests from our system operator, really the blame for that should not be laid at the door of Eskom, but perhaps your energies would be better placed at asking the questions of those municipalities that seem to have blatantly ignored requests to assist the system during this constrained time. With regard to my participation at COP26, that participation was cut short, as you may be aware, and I specifically came back to pay visits in the company of the Chief Operating Officer as well as the Group Executive Generation to visit 7 power stations over a weekend. It is important, though, that we should also look towards the future. Eskom is not only about what is happening with our generation system today. It is also about where are we going to get the money to make the transition to a lower carbon economy going forward. And if Eskom and Eskom management is not present and represented at those sessions, then we will be gazumped by countries such as Indonesia, India, Vietnam. Now, I think that would be a great loss for South Africa if we were unable to secure the 131 billion rand made available by foreign governments to South Africa to enable that just energy transition on highly concessional terms. So I think I would respond by saying that I think there were 131 billion very good reasons for me to be at COP26. Thank you.
Thank you, Andre. Let's now go to the hands again that have been raised. Mariam, you say part of your question has not been answered. Please just hang in there. We will ask Aviwe Mtila to speak. You have been unmuted from our side. Next, you will be followed by Mariam Issa. Aviwe, can we hear you? Mariam, please go ahead.
Hi, Sikonathi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, thank you very much. The second part of my question was just, is it actually possible to stabilize the system as it is? We've heard that we need another 4,000 to 6,000 megawatts of power in order to avoid load shedding, to have enough capacity. But is it possible to actually stabilize the system as it is? And how long might this take? Are we in for another 2 years, 4 years? What will it take? And my second question, sorry, I'm just going to sneak this in because COP26 was mentioned. South Africa was offered this concessional finance for transition to greener energy. But we have heard from the Environment Minister that South Africa won't be part of the pledge for shifting away from coal. And we heard from the Minerals and Energy Minister that there are still plans to build new coal capacity. Given these two things, are we in any danger of losing that concessional finance?
Thank you, Mariam. Please do lower your hand. Andre, go ahead.
Yeah, I think as far as the energy mix of the country is concerned going forward, that is a question best addressed to the policy department. As you're aware, Mariam, the DMRE is responsible for formulating the integrated resource plan, which is the guideline policy document for the energy mix of South Africa going forward. And we are unable to comment on the content of that plan and how it is going to be implemented. With regard to the first part of your question, I think it's important to emphasize that Eskom is designated as the single buyer of electricity in South Africa, with some minor exceptions, for example, municipalities in good standing as announced by the President 2 summers ago. But I think it is also important to stress that Eskom cannot procure significant quantities of electricity by itself. That process is driven by the Independent Power Producer Office, which reports into the DMRE. So while Eskom is the off-taker in terms of those agreements, it cannot go out into the market and issue inquiries by itself. That is a constraint that we face, and that is why the onus for ensuring that new capacity is added on to the grid as quickly as possible is on the IPP office, and that's why we welcome the recent announcement of the bid window 5 preferred bidders. We think that that's an important step in the right direction. What can be done to stabilize the system? I think the system requires additional work and additional maintenance. We really are doing our utmost. The Eskom team, and in particular the generation team, really are working extremely hard, and our people are under a lot of pressure and a lot of stress to make sure that they can deliver on the expectations of 60 million people. We remind them of that obligation very often, and it's a responsibility that they take very seriously. But I think that until such time as we have that headroom, given the lack of predictability and reliability of the system, there will be a residual risk in spite of those best efforts. Thanks, Ikonati.
Jan, do you want to add something onto this, please?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Ikonati. Marian, what do we have available now that we can, and it's difficult to say, but to guarantee for 24/7, 365? When we had stage 6 load shedding on the 9th of December 2019, the state president had to cut short his trip and come back to South Africa. And on the 11th of December, the same year, we as management and the board faced the president, the deputy president, the minister of DPE and the minister of DMRE. And the question was asked to me, and at the time, and I think not a lot has changed since then, based on our availability, which we can give 24/7, 365, our guests and which we're pretty sure about, is 25,000 to 27,000 megawatts. That is what we believe we have available where we are now. And this is why I said to the president and the ministers with him and the deputy president that we need the 46,000 megawatts as soon as possible. We're already too late. What we need to understand also, we have 80 coal-fired power plant units in the system. Now, the 3 that I'm not mentioning is a 3 at Kusile that still needs to be put in place into commercial operation. Now, these 80, in terms of reliability or philosophy maintenance, we've done 7 since we announced in the beginning of last year. Taking into consideration we lost 6 months due to COVID. Now, to do one unit, to do the philosophy maintenance, reliability maintenance, you need 24 months to plan it properly. And in that 24 months, the finance need to be available. All the resources as you plan need to be available. So a lot of things need to take place, and you need to know exactly the scope of work of that specific unit before you open the breaker. And if it's then necessary to have it offline for 3-6 months, whatever needs to happen and need to be implemented on that unit, that is then what you need to do. Which all of the things I'm giving you now, we do not have available at this point in time. So if you look at the 7 units that we have done reliability maintenance to date, it was all done with what we believe we should have done. It wasn't properly planned. Money was not available. We're currently busy with another 5, and the money was only released. First, as I said last time, 11 billion. 3 billion was only released around about end of April, and another 3 billion by the end of September. So we find ourselves in quite a challenging situation. So your question, when are we going to get stability? Stability at the current demand is really challenging. And this is why we cannot emphasize enough that we need additional capacity on the system like in the day before yesterday. It is absolutely critical. Thanks, Marty.
Thank you, Jan. Avuile Mtila has been trying to ask a question. I have it written here for me. Could I please get a quick response to the following? There are reports that some Eskom employees are on a go-slow. What has been the impact on load shedding, and what are the issues that they are unhappy with? Mondebala, please, can I ask you to answer that question? Thank you.
Yeah, no thanks, Sikonati. Eskom employees are not on a go-slow. We had a situation about a week or 2 ago when there was some sort of industrial action by a small section of our employees in an area in Gauteng. That situation was dealt with within a day or two, and it was resolved. So to answer the question of you, the Eskom employees are not on a go-slow. Thank you, Mr. Manjanja.
I thank you, Monde. Kyle Cohen and then Antoinette Slavet, you have been unmuted from our side. And once you have asked your question, please lower your hand. I see, Aldrin, you are back. We've been trying to get hold of you. You will come next. Kyle, and then Antoinette, please.
Thank you, Sikonati, and thank you for the briefing. My question is, it's Kyle Cowan from News 24. My question is directed to Mr. Jan Oberholzer. Yesterday at peak at 8 p.m., 20,000 megawatt was generated by thermal coal, which means that 52% of our coal-fired power stations were unavailable or offline. I understand that about 5,500 megawatt of that is planned maintenance. So question in two parts. At what point do these power stations, these serial offenders who keep breaking down, become inoperable? At what point do we have to stop spending money on them, or they become too expensive? Secondly, you reiterated during the system status briefing recently that you will not sacrifice the reliability maintenance program for those 5,000 megawatt to gain that back into the system. Do you maintain that position? Do you maintain that this program is absolutely necessary, even if we are in a situation where some of the planned maintenance can be postponed for a week or two? Thank you.
Thanks, Kyle. Antoinette?
Thank you, Sikonati.
Please lower your hand, Kyle.
Thank you, Sikonati. I'm trying to get my head around this issue of municipalities that don't comply with the load shedding instructions. Are you saying that almost 160 municipalities in the country have suddenly decided not to comply? Or is this an issue that has developed that has never been addressed? I haven't heard you or anybody at Eskom raising this ever before. How big is the shortfall? How big was the shortfall when they did not comply? Because 2,000 megawatts should have been shed. I think many people in South Africa saw power outages all around them, and you're saying there's no compliance. We really need some more detail and also the level of non-compliance. If you could perhaps give us information about the level of non-compliance of the different municipalities afterwards.
Thank you, Antoinette. Please do lower your hand. Jan, are you going to take Kyle's questions first in terms of maintaining the power stations? And then Monde, immediately after Jan, you will answer the question on municipalities.
Thanks, Sikonati. Kyle, yes. Two very good questions. In terms of poor performers, we've put a strategy in place. So we did look at the performance of the coal power station fleet, and then also in terms of the age of those power stations, and then to assess what needs to be invested in these power stations. And the investment is not only related to the energy availability, it is also related to emissions. And that is a big issue that we need to take note of. And this is why we in Eskom, we're driving the clean energy so hard. So based on the plans that we have, we will retire power stations by 2030 up to 8,000 megawatts of coal-fired power plant. And then leading up to 2035, over 22,000 megawatts. So we are cognizant of the fact that what we need to invest and what the benefits are and what is the contribution to clean energy. So Carl, just to put your mind at ease, so we are looking at that. We have put a strategy in place. We have shared it with the board, and there is support for this. Then your question on, are we going to sacrifice reliability maintenance? The answer is very simple, no. If we sacrifice reliability maintenance now, it means that the performance, we may have a positive contribution in the short term that you were running, that you will delay outages. You will then basically focus on legislative, maintenance and deal with the issues that the law requires, and something that you can take out quickly and bring it back. However, what you then do is just to delay a real situation of trouble from a system availability point of view moving forward. And then you're going to utilize those units that is available to a level that is not sustainable. Things that we've seen in the past, the recent past as well, that the energy utilization is so high that, and then you don't maintain those, then you are going to have more and more breakdowns. So just to reiterate and repeat myself, we will continue with the liability maintenance, because if you have a car, that's what you do. And we're very cognizant of our mandate, as the group exec said earlier, our mandate to make sure that we have energy available, electricity, for the lives of 60 million people and to grow the economy and everything that is related to that. Thank you.
Monday.
Yeah, no, thanks, Sikonati. Just to put a bit of context on the issue of the municipalities, when we looked at what has happened over the past couple of days to understand why we had to move from stage 2 to stage 4, it then was picked up that some of our major customers did not reduce or did not fully comply with their load shedding requirement. Upfront, Antoinette, we put together load shedding schedules that are in line with our regulatory requirements, and they are meant to be equitable and rotational, so that we all share on the load. So each of our customers, they've got their own schedule. Specifically, the municipalities, they do their own load shedding on their side. The only thing that we get commitment from them is the size of the block that we require with each stage of load shedding. So it then happened that when we looked at the events, at the last load shedding event, we then discovered that we did not get the response as we would have required in line with the blocks that we were committed. We are in the process of engaging with each of these municipalities. The focus at this point in time was in the bigger municipalities and the metros, and we're not saying that all the 168 or whatever the number of municipalities have not complied. No, the focus was on the bigger ones, because we needed to make sure that we understand from a volume point of view what went on. So we are engaging with the municipalities, and we will correct the situation so that at the next bout of load shedding, that we all sort of comply with our requirements. As it was earlier indicated, it remains our responsibility to make sure that we adhere to the instructions of the system operator as the distributors. If we do not get sufficient adequate level of compliance, it remains our responsibility to then take the precautionary measures to make sure that we protect the integrity of the system. And in so doing, we will then have to take the necessary preemptive steps if we do not reach the level of compliance. But we are engaging with the municipalities, and the situation will be corrected. Thank you, Sikonati.
Monday, Bala, thank you, sir. This is the last round of questions, colleagues. There are 3 people, Ray Matlaka, William Horn, and Chris Yelland. In that order, please. Ray, are you able to unmute yourself? William Horn?
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Fantastic. I'll try to keep it brief. This question is for Andre de Ruyter. On Friday, your acting head of maintenance, Paula Goatley, explained in no uncertain terms that the recovery, the reliability maintenance and recovery program is basically your saving grace going forward. And that this will secure the necessary parts and workmanship to get the 13 power stations currently not performing at your 75% EAF target up to scratch. My question is, she indicated that the budget for the RMR program for FY 2023 and FY 2024 has not yet been secured. How will you secure this necessary funding if this is not the silver bullet, but a key component of fixing your aging plant? Will you ask government for an additional bailout, or is there another method to secure the funding for 2023 and 2024? Thank you.
Thanks, William. If I can ask our Chief Financial Officer, Caleb Kassam, to please respond to that question. Caleb, please.
Thank you, Andre. Yeah, thanks for that. I think the reality is twofold. Number one, first, we know the issues around the regulator, and our current cycle comes to an end at the end of March. The regulator has rejected our application. We are reviewing that in the court. So before, as Andre has indicated, as finance, before we can release any funding, we would need to identify that source. So I think first and foremost, getting clarity and a revenue inflow by the regulatory process is critical. And obviously, depending on if there's any shortfall from that process, we would then engage with National Treasury via our shareholder, like we've done in the past. So I think to your question is, once we know our revenue streams, we can then allocate what is affordable. But I think it's key to understand that revenue inflow. Otherwise, it creates a bigger problem over and above just funding of maintenance. We have many other costs, including debt service, to look at if there is no revenue streams. Thanks.
Thank you, Caleb. Chris Sealand, please, can you ask your question? And then I'm going to ask Swazi to read Ray's question, which is on the comments section. And then from there, we will be closing, colleagues. We have been here for 93 minutes now.
Thank you, Sekonati. Question that I have, please. Eskom, you have named the offending municipalities, all of them, in fact, except two. Can you also please name the offending key industrial customers involved in not shedding load when instructed to by the system operator? And secondly, has the Eskom board agreed to enter into power purchase agreements with Car Powership, a successful preferred bidder in 3 projects of the Emergency Risk Mitigation IPP program? Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Monde, are you able to answer the question on key industrial users who did not shed? Chris, please do lower your hand. And Andre, you are going to talk to Car Powership, please.
Sekonati, we were still looking at the detail, obviously combing through each of the customers that are supposed to give us their respective loads. So at this point in time, no, we're not able to name any of the key industrial customers. Safe to say that we have some of our key industrial customers that did not respond as per requirement. Thank you.
Andre, thank you, Mr. Mala.
Chris, the answer is no.
To what question?
To the Car Powership question.
Thank you, Andre. Swazi, we have the last question that you can read, please, from Ray Mahlaka, who couldn't unmute himself. If you have 1 or 2 more that have not been dealt with, and then I will come to you to close, Andre, after the answers.
Okay, Siko Ray Matlaka from Daily Maverick wants to know, Eskom recently said that diesel supplies are critically low. Are you on track with procuring more diesel by mid-November as planned? Is Eskom facing problems with the procurement of diesel? Then we've also got one from Carol Payton at the Business Day. Mr. Director, at the time you took over Eskom, there was a hiring freeze. Is that still the case? And are you able or unable to hire the technical skills you require for this or other reasons? We've also got the last one from Kopano Gumbi at Newsroom Africa. With the system deteriorating even further, do you think you may have dropped the ball in maintaining the fleet while trying to get Medupi and Kusile online? And her second question is, how much new funding have you received to expand capacity and from where? Thanks.
Thank you, Namaswazi. Please answer the question on diesel. Jan Oberholzer, please answer the question, did you drop the ball? And we will leave the rest to Andre, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Sigonati. Did we drop the ball on diesel? No, we did not. Did we design these open cycle gas turbines to be run as base load the way we currently doing it? No, it was not designed for that. It was designed to assist during high peaks. However, because of the constrained system that we have, we are utilizing it sometimes unnecessary and very expensively as baseload stations. Now, you can only, based on the outlook of the system, make sure that you do have sufficient diesel available. And that is what we are doing. Our General Manager of Peaking, Avi Singh, is doing a tremendous job, and I'd like to salute him as well as his colleagues for really doing a sterling job to make sure that we have volume available. However, the way that we have burned the volumes during November, and a vessel only it takes a long time for a vessel. You know, you have to go out on a tender, Petro SA as an example. They then need to place a contract with a vessel to come to South Africa to offload the volumes. Now, the vessel is not waiting just outside Mossel Bay, you know, to get a contract. So it takes time then for this vessel to arrive to offload and then for us to transfer the diesel to ourselves. So we find ourselves at Gerikwa specifically in a very challenging situation that we do have a pipe from Petro SA supplying diesel to Gerikwa. However, the offside volumes are extremely low, and we are preserving that as much as possible, because we can find ourselves in a very high level of load shedding should we utilize all the volumes that is off-site. So at Ankerlig down in Cape Town, we more fortunately having off-site volumes, but it makes it more logistically more difficult because the volumes of diesel, it's delivered to Ankerlig Power Station by trucks. So we have a logistical challenge, and whenever there is a price difference in diesel, maybe positive, negative, and you can guess which one makes it difficult for us to get the logistics right. So I do not believe that we've got it wrong. So we're doing a good job based on the conditions that we find ourselves. Thank you.
Jan, the other question was whether you have dropped the ball on maintaining the rest of the power station fleet.
I don't believe so. Let me first refer to the open cycle gas turbines, and I'd like to just assure the public that these units are maintained as prescribed. So the philosophy and the reliability maintenance is done. Now, on the coal-fired power plant, the last decade or so, we did not do all the reliability maintenance as prescribed and required for that specific unit. And there are various reasons for that. One, I'm sure Andre will deal with now, is the issue of finance. So did we have sufficient capital? No, we did not. So did we drop the ball over the last decade or so? Yes, we have, by not maintaining it properly as prescribed in the way we're supposed to do it. And it's not only maintenance, it is also mid-life refurbishment where you need to replace certain components. Thanks.
Thank you, Jan. Andre, please answer the last two questions and close in your closure, I would like you to answer as clearly as possible in layman's language. Are we able, when are we still going for how long are we still going to have load shedding? That is the question. I saw it, several people asking it here. Thank you.
Right, thanks, Sikonati. So if I can respond to Carol's question. Carol, yes, we do have a hiring freeze at Eskom that is in place, but we have an exemption for scarce and critical skills. So we are not applying this in a brute force manner across all categories. Where we have a requirement for specific skills, we are able to make exceptions, and we can approach the market to recruit. So this is not a blunt instrument to try and reduce our headcount at the expense of skill and experience. So we are able to procure those skills. Of course, some of those skills are hard to find in the market. South Africa generally has shed quite a lot of skills. There are a number of Eskom operators that are operating plants in the Middle East, in Indonesia, Vietnam, Philippines, and so forth, where they are remunerated very well. And I think, as Jan has indicated in a previous engagement with the media, our staff are attractive to international firms who come and recruit here with hard currency offers that are difficult to match. So that does afford a constraint. Sikonati, if you can just help me what the second question was. I've got the question from Carol, but not the second question.
So can you repeat that for me, please?
Sorry, Siko, I was just struggling to unmute. You wanted the second question from Kopano?
It was from Carol Payton. She asked one question. Kopano's question has been answered by Jan, Andre, so we are done.
Okay, I thought I didn't get a second question, so that confirms it. Thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for attending. Thank you for your penetrating questions. I really appreciate the fact that this is a matter of national importance. It is something that we are engaged with 24/7 as Eskom. We are doing our utmost to meet our commitments to the country in a positive, constructive way, given the constraints that we face. We are, however, in this challenging situation together, and you may think that switching off lights, only filling up your kettle to boil the water that you need and not filling it up to the brim, that does not make a difference. But if 6.7 million customers across South Africa all use energy wisely and efficiently, it really does make a difference to our demand, particularly during peak hours. And again, it is very important that we all play our part in managing our constrained electricity supply wisely. Load shedding, Sikonati, to answer your final question, is a risk that we will have to live with until we get that additional capacity of between 4,000 and 6,000 megawatts on the grid. And the sooner that we are able to remove whatever blockages exist in order to enable that capacity to be added, the sooner we can see the back of this very negative phenomenon that has impacted our country now for more than 13 years. This is not a new phenomenon. This is something that we've lived with for a long time, and the time's now come for us to act decisively to address this particular matter. Thank you very much for your attendance, and I wish you a very good afternoon. Goodbye.
Thank you, colleagues, and thank you for joining this briefing again at short notice. The this recording will be shared with every member of the media that is listed in Eskom's distribution system. So if you do not receive emails from Eskom, please send an email to mediadesk@eskom.co.za and ask to be added to the list. You will receive this recording as soon as possible. Thank you very much for your attendance and for your questions. Good night.
Good night.